Eric, how we doing, man?
Good, man. Good to be back.
Good to be back, breaking into tech sales this year. So for those of you who've been trying to break into tech sales, you probably already know it feels more competitive than ever. But the good news is if you follow the right playbook, you can still easily land a tech sales role and set yourself up on a very fast path to earning six figures plus. And that's exactly what Eric and I have been helping hundreds of students do this year. So today in this episode, we really just want to break down that step-by-step process we teach, how to position your resume, apply strategically so you're not just spraying and praying, crushing the interview process, and then staying consistent with everything until you finally break through and land a top-tier role. So Eric, want to get your thoughts too, but that's really what I want to make sure we cover with the audience today. And I know you're probably more qualified than anyone on the internet to do this. So
Yeah, no, I would just add, as we get into it, I think one, hiring has been, especially at the SDR level, it's been incredibly strong. I do think it is more competitive to your point, and we're going to break that down. But again, I think for the right person, like a couple examples come to mind right off the cuff. Literally spoke to someone in our community earlier today who was rejected from a job opportunity, followed up with both reps and the hiring manager multiple times. And they now not only got an interview, but the hiring manager had it scheduled for Thursday, reached out to them yesterday and was like, hey, can we actually move this up to Wednesday? So lots of different things we're going to break down. But yes, it's competitive, but I still think, and what we'll break down among many other things is I think if you're not incredibly passionate about becoming a doctor, the leading computer scientist, I still think it's the best career you can have breaking into tech.
totally agree. So I just want to start, let's set the stage. A lot of people, in order to go through a process like this, it can be daunting. You will probably have to deal with rejection for reasons that are sometimes out of your control. So I think it's important to have a motivation and know why you want to get into tech sales. And I have my reasons, I'll cover them, why I think it's still one of the best, if not the best career paths today. But in your eyes, why should people be looking at tech sales roles and be committed to making it happen if that's really what they want?
Yeah, and it's funny because I actually made some content reflecting on this recently. And I genuinely, again, for those of you that don't know me, I studied engineering in college. I worked as an engineer for 3 years, hated it, switched over to tech sales myself. And I think right now, there's no doubt there's uncertainty in the market with AI. However, from the perspective of both your individual professional career, and especially if you're an ambitious person that wants to long-term start your own company or do something of that nature, I think tech sales is the best because one, again, unless you're like a leading computer scientist, you're not going to break into an AI company as an example, other than through sales. Obviously, the earning potential is there, but also, Connor, I know we've made several episodes about AI, how we're using it in our day-to-day. I'm sure there's ways we also use it for our online presences on YouTube and TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think the skill set right now, if I was literally graduating college right now, I would still want to break into tech sales specifically because you are attached to tech. Who knows where it goes? Who knows where AI goes? But if you're one of the first people right now that figures out how to sell that successfully and has a track record, you are immensely valuable to your current and future employers. And then two, again, I still see, and I'm sure you've seen this as well with our channels, like we are credible voices about sales and marketing on the internet. We have tons of technical founders reaching out to us because they don't know how to sell. And my point being is, who knows where your career and your business goes? But I think if you actually learn how to sell what previously was very difficult of like building products, building services, you can now build brands for free with social media. You can now build products with relatively low lift. Sure, you may have to hire an expert here or there, but if you understand fundamentally how to sell, you better understand the emotional, the EQ side, the relationship side of buying and selling things, whether it's business to business or direct to consumer. It has never been easier to now fill your weaknesses with AI and with technology. So truly, unless you are someone who is very, very passionate about programming, which is a great career, and I'd recommend you go into that, I think the next best skill set you can have is being very well equipped from a sales side, and then also self-educating and or in your job using AI, learning how to use that and really get exponential leverage on your efforts, both professionally and personally in your own endeavors. So yeah.
Well said. It is very transferable experience. Some things I'd add too, and it's probably obvious to a lot of people who are here looking to break into tech sales, but the earning potential, especially for entry-level positions, is pretty insane. Like in the past, if you wanted to make six figures plus your first year out of college, it was pretty much you had to go an investment banking track. Otherwise, you're looking at consulting jobs. I know that's what I was looking at originally when I was about to graduate college, that were 50, 60K bases with no upside, and you had to grind and work like 60 hours a week, and you just show up every day, or at least from the friends I talked to, just kind of hoping you didn't get put on new projects and cases and just waiting for the clock to end, and there was no upside to your performance. So the high earning potential combined with the strong work life too, like generally it's 40 hours or less per week in that entry level position. Plus, if you're doing well, there's a lot of autonomy and flexibility once you're performing. It's not like, hey, here's some tasks I need you to complete by end of day. There's pretty much unlimited ways to go about your job. There's also clear career progression at a lot of these companies, from SDR to account executive, whether it's SMB to mid-market to enterprise, leadership opportunities. And like you said, with AI, it's just an explosive growing industry. If you can develop sales skills in a big industry, your skill set's going to be very transferable. To your point, you can jump from opportunity to opportunity and have the skill set needed to do so. And then last point I make too is that it's just great experience. A lot of people who are in the older generation I talk to in their 40s or 50s, they still say when I talk to them, they would kill to have these types of opportunities when they were just graduating college or in their 20s. In the past, it's still a relatively new thing. SDR, BDR jobs were like mostly for 30-plus-year-olds. They were professional hires that companies would kind of try and steal from each other on the job market. And to be able to get that experience out of college, developing sales skills, the ability to generate pipeline, develop business, working with business executives at some of the biggest companies in the world. That was like when I was 22, 23, I was getting on calls with CIOs and chief technology officers at very big companies. You have a little bit of imposter syndrome, but overall, that experience translates very well. Obviously, if you want to stay in sales, but also if you want to move into entrepreneurship or leadership or other industries, totally agree on the transferability. So let's get into, you're bought in, you want to join, you want to get into tech sales, but now where do you get started before you even apply in terms of crafting the foundation, things like your resume and your story for why you want to break into tech sales? What are some things you see in terms of what hiring managers and recruiters are actually looking for in these resumes? And where do you tell people to even get started before they start actively applying to roles?
Yeah, well, genuinely, not even a plug here. I mean, I think one of the great things, and honestly, what compelled us both to make content, is there's truly more content on YouTube and other platforms than has ever existed. Now, you got to find the credible people, but that's where I would start if you genuinely have no idea. We're going to break through with this episode, or break down some of these steps. But if you're truly starting at zero, instead of feeling like helpless or asking in the comments, like, what should I do? A very vague, not a great question to ask, because we literally have deep dive long form videos. Like, binge through Connor's channel, binge through our channel on YouTube. And then also, if you are looking for coaching, that's what we do in Tech Sales Ascension. But as an aside, like, I think the important thing right now, if I'm starting and really thinking about my story, and this is great timing because we actually partner with a company to supply them SDR talent. And it's a company that raised $250 million recently in AI specifically. Kind of hitting on your past point, but also this upcoming question about your foundation. Like, one of the beauties of breaking in, especially to AI right now, is you got to perform in the interview. You got to crush it. You've got to have your story right, and we'll get into that. But keep in mind, like, AI is brand new. And I talked to this SDR manager, and they don't have this one profile of like, I need a 3.5 GPA minimum from one of these, top 10 universities or something of that nature. They're looking for a broad, diverse skill set. They walk me through their team of SDRs today. They have anyone from, say, like a 35-year-old that career transitioned from being a recruiter. They have a former teacher that transitioned into an SDR role. They have several new graduates that had no direct sales experience, but had things that showed they had like kind of the tenacity or athletic background, or they were clearly putting themselves in a position where they were very clearly judged on their outputs. So that's a very common theme that I would say when you're thinking about your story and foundation and even getting these pieces together is, what are the things that you can demonstrate, even if you don't have sales experience, that you have been judged on and gotten a measurable outcome? Don't make that more complicated than not. But if you were at an internship and you performed 25% better than your peers, if you're a realtor and you close $2 million worth of transactions, that's a great stat. go even further, how does that compare to the average realtor at your company? How does that compare year over year to your own performance? What were some of the metrics and things that you did to actually get those results? And even in my case, when I was an engineer, no direct sales experience, I worked a lot on customer facing calls, and I could speak to, having solved problems that cost, as an example, Microsoft $150,000 an hour, or I recommended a different process or a different tooling or buying a different product, which was one bullet in of itself. But I could also speak to kind of a before, really define that before state, and speak to after what my work had impacted and why that mattered at a business level. So not just we made everything run faster, we saved $150,000 an hour, right? We automated a process that used to take 4 people 2 days to do. We automated that, and it now completes by itself in 10 minutes, right? These are simple examples of more, I would say, that quantitative piece. And if I'm not talking too long, I can add one more thing on the qualitative side. Yeah, I think one thing that really came up today too, and you'll see on our channel, we talk about this a lot, both on our YouTube channel and the higher levels community as well, is having a very strong story. So this gets away from just the metrics of like, I delivered this result, I did this, which led to 100K of this or whatever it may be. Really having a strong, compelling story. I think it's evolved from where in the past, if you were like, hey, I graduated in accounting, or maybe, hey, I got a construction job right out of high school and I worked my way to project manager and now I want to break into tech sales. That was a pretty good story 2 to 3 years ago. Now I would say people want you to be even more specific around not just, hey, maybe I tried something and I want to go into sales, or, I don't know, I went to school, didn't like my degree, I'm very competitive, so I want to be in sales. That's a good start. But having a very clear story, regardless of your background, of not only why you want to go into tech sales, but really subtly, and also I would say not so subtly, communicating that this is the thing you want to do minimum for the next 5 to 10 years. And it's very subtle. It's very nuanced. It's just a little bit more than what I was describing. But I think that is the really important thing right now. This is arguably, I think, the hottest career, certainly in the US, in my opinion, for like anyone 20 to 25 right now. Sales, and especially tech sales, I think is the most popular. So you need to go above and beyond, not overexerting yourself or making yourself look like desperate, but you've got to have not only just a clear story of why you want to be in sales. Maybe you tried something, it didn't work, but like, you need to convince me that you are locked in over the next 5 years of not only breaking into tech sales, you clearly have a story why you want to work for this company specifically, and you clearly have an end goal in mind. That may change, but you're coming into this interview not to say, oh, I want to be in tech sales. You're like, hey, I chose this company specifically because I want to be an SDR. I've seen you promote several other SDRs, and my goal within the next 5 to 7 years, assuming I perform, would be to get to the enterprise account executive level. From there, I want to go to maybe a manager or director, fill in the blanks, whatever your story may be. But that is the nuance and the extra, I think, cherry on top, among many other things we're going to talk about on this podcast, where you've got to be really convincing that you're not chasing a trend. This isn't like a thing you're going to try and kind of come in, half out in a year and a half from now, go back to accounting or wherever you came from. Like, you really got to sell the story now that this is what you want. This is why you're going to perform because of your track record and also your approach to the job itself. And this is why 2 years from now, you're going to be their number one performer and fulfill on a lot of different things. So, yeah.
Yep. Extremely well said. I can verify just about everything you just shared because for the audience that knows, I used to be an SDR manager. I did well into the over 100 interviews, hired dozens of candidates. The ones that tended not to work out were the ones who didn't have that certainty for why they wanted to go into sales and where they saw themselves 3 to 5 years down the line. When you heard things like, oh, I just want to build this skill set so that I can move into entrepreneurship and do my own thing, or I just want to see, I know there's lots of opportunities at the company, I might also want to do marketing or pivot into operations. Those are the people who tended not to pan out. So look, if you want the job, whether it's true or not, maybe you do have intentions to move into the entrepreneurship realm. But like, if you want the job and you're there to get the job, you need to have a crystal clear story of how you see your career progressing over the next 3 to 5 years, what skills you want to build in this SDR role, where you want to go next. You don't want to be too presumptive and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a manager in the next 2 years and that's what I'm expecting. You're saying like, you're going to focus on crushing every individual role that you're in and naturally earning these promotions to get the experience you want. But people don't want to hire reps that are going to be there for a year and leave. They want to hire reps that are going to grow within the company and be good for the culture and be there long term. So that's part one. And then part two, I just also want to verify on the resume piece. Totally right with the like concrete numbers and examples, because I can tell you when I was a manager, when I would do these interviews, I would have 3 to 5 per day at times. And I'm still working my full-time job, managing 10 to 13 reps at any given time. The resume's job was to get you to the interview. Yes, I would scan them, and that's what those numbers are good for, where if I see something that catches my eye, I'm zooming in. Otherwise, for the most part, the resume's already done its job by the time you're at the sales manager level, especially for these entry-level positions. And now I'm more on that interview, listening carefully to your story and why are you here? How did you prepare for this call? Did you genuinely have a burning desire to be here and grow your career here? That's what I care more about than if you had a 2.9 or a 3.6 GPA at one college versus another. That means nothing to me. So totally agree, everything there. Now let's move into beyond that. Let's say some of the folks here are probably in the interview process. They're consistently landing these interviews. So now we're getting into the game. What are some high level strategies in terms of how you teach people to go about applying, whether it's spam applying on LinkedIn job postings, not doing that and only cold calling managers and being super targeted and networking? I'm sure there's a time and place for both, but what do you see being the most effective and how people should go about actually generating these interviews for themselves?
Yeah, I would say a few things come to mind, and definitely with this, what I'm about to say, you have to start somewhere. So if you're not here, that's totally fine. I recognize if this is like the first video you've seen or the first week you're really thinking about this, just something to keep in mind of where to be. I would say one of the most common things I see of people in the higher levels community in particular is when you're first getting started, again, that's totally fine. But if you're a month in and still kind of like, I'm open to really any opportunity. If it's, I'm just looking for a great tech company, ideally like hybrid or whatever it may be. One of the things I think is the most useful exercise is you are not going to know exactly what you want to sell, exactly the type of company that you want to work for. And that's totally fine. But I think one of the most useful exercises early on that we recommend people do is whittling down a list of 30 to 50 companies that are either hiring or consistently hire, like an Oracle of the world, as an example, that continually is hiring cohorts of SDRs. Honestly, again, aside from crafting your story, crafting your foundation, actually putting a target or some type of parameters, if you'll call it that, to decide, hey, these 30 to 50 opportunities are the ones I'm going to apply for. That's where I recommend, because if you show up to an interview or you're networking, and that's something we'll definitely get into, of like, once you've defined that, actually reaching out to these SDRs, reaching out to hiring managers directly. But if I can tell that you're really looking for any and every sales job, and that may be the case, but you do not want to project that when you're talking to someone or give the impression that you're just going to take like one opportunity. So make an educated guess. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of resources to help you determine what companies are best for you. And then from there, obviously, if you've watched our channels at all, just applying is like a no-go. I hope that's common nature at this point, but especially in sales, I would say a few different themes hold true. Let's say you've got a list of 30 companies. The biggest thing I recommend is starting from the bottom, so number 30, and work your way up towards the top. Let's say you apply to job number 30 to job number 20. You apply to 10 jobs, and you're getting a 40% interview rate. That's exceptionally good. But what that also means is now, don't waste your time on mid-tier companies you're so about. You've now tested that your resume, the way you're approaching this is working, and then I would go immediately to your top 10 and start applying to those. In addition to doing that, if there is an active job listing right now, I always recommend do apply, and then immediately, like right after, email the hiring manager. So find their information. You can use tools like Apollo and otherwise to find this. So you apply, you then send a follow-up email. And now I think, whereas this used to be a nice to have, in my opinion, this is a non-negotiable. Cold call the hiring manager as well. And if they don't pick up, leave a voicemail. So how to format that, I mean, we could definitely deep dive on all of that, but that's like a non-negotiable. The flip side, and where I also see people missing opportunity, is let's say you have identified, I don't know, MongoDB is a company you want to break into, but they don't have any active job listings right now. Do not sit there and wait until they have a job opening. So for the jobs that are actively open right now, go ahead and apply. message the hiring manager, cold call the hiring manager. If you have time, cold email or message or LinkedIn the SDRs or account executives there that maybe you have something in common with or whatever the case may be. But I especially think for these larger companies that are well-respected companies that have a renowned SDR training program, maybe they're not hiring right now, but they continually hire people quarter over quarter. That is a missed opportunity I see a lot of people not doing to network with SDRs at that company. So, hey, Connor, let's say when you were back at Oracle, you're working there and you and I don't know, both went to the same school or, didn't have any sales experience and you broke in. I'm going to send you a cold message as an SDR saying, hey, Connor, really love the progress you've had at Oracle. Saw you broke in without past sales experience and our backgrounds are rather similar. Curious if we could sync for 15 minutes so I can best position myself for the next opening, something of that nature, right? And if you're not doing that for those bigger opportunities, you're not going to be ready when the time comes. And sure, maybe you've got a killer resume, maybe your outreach to the hiring manager works, but that's one thing I'm seeing now in 2025, specifically as it's getting more and more competitive. Your major brand names, your Salesforce, your outreach, Oracle, insert large tech company at this point, when they list a job, hiring managers now, where they previously would respond to cold messages and cold calls, they're getting 500 applicants, 100 inbox, 100 DMs in their inbox. And that's why, again, I still think cold calling stands out because maybe 5 people are doing that. But again, if you're waiting that long and you don't even have a potential referral into the next time the job opportunity becomes available, your chances, I would say, are probably halved among many other things. So I've dumped a lot. I'll pause there, but that's how I think about it.
No, I love the strategy. I mean, it's doing the job before you're on the job, because for those of you that haven't worked in the SDR role yet and you're still trying to break in, that's what you're doing when you start a SDR job. You're generally given a territory with a set list of accounts, and your job is to go break into those accounts and strategically reach out to key decision makers there, whether it's end business users versus management level, doing the same thing in the interview process too, and in strategically reaching out to some of the reps in the group, in the manager. It gives them confidence that like, oh, this is what this person's going to be like when they're actually breaking into accounts. So I also love your strategy with starting with those, like, not to call them the bottom 10, but the 20 to 30 range. One, to test your strategy and if it's landing interviews, but two, and this could be a good transition to the next topic, actually getting on the interviews. But I've always found, even in my past experience interviewing for roles and coaching people, the first few reps you get on recruiting interviews, sales manager interviews, it's not generally your best performance because it's the first time you're answering the questions. No matter how much you've prepared, there's always a few curveballs, and you learn and you're like, oh, I got to be ready for that next time. And I think anyone who's watching who has gone through this process, the first time you answer the why sales question or why do you want to go into sales or work for this company is nowhere near as good as the 10th time you've answered it. So you kind of you work out those reps before you start applying to your top 10 companies. So you're ready to go and you kind of have your answers down by the time you're there. So
yeah, I would just add on that note. Yeah, just like very real example. We worked with someone that broke into HubSpot. They ended up getting like $146K AE offer. They had some adjacent sales experience and weren't sure if they could be SDR or AE, but they networked with an account executive at HubSpot, had a coffee chat with them. They hit it off and they were able to get a referral into that role. And additionally, one of the things they said when we were talking to them after they broke in to this exact point is he literally said, I would not have gotten this job if this was not my 8th interview. So he had previously failed like 5 interviews. He was in the process with 2 others, but literally was like, I would not have crushed this HubSpot interview if I hadn't put my foot in my mouth like 3 to 5 times before that in game time situation. So really well said. Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. Shout out to him if he's watching, because he's a dog. And then, so yeah, I mean, once we're in the interview process at a high level, I guess maybe do you want to overview just briefly what people can expect in these interviews, from like the general structure, recruiter interview, a sales manager, to sometimes a role play, and then maybe some of the biggest mistakes you see candidates make in those early interviews where they don't have the reps yet, so that they can avoid them and not have to go through that trial and error process.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly like you said. First round's typically recruiter interview, maybe 20 minutes. The next one is going to be 30 to 45 minutes with a sales manager. From there, maybe one more, pending the structure of the company, with an additional manager, usually an exercise. This could be like a cold call exercise. This could be a presentation is a common one I see at some of your bigger companies as well. Sometimes a discovery call, but that's less common, I would say. It's usually more the cold call or presentation. Then after that, it's usually a final round or two with like a VP, maybe a CRO, pending the size of the company. I'll break down at least, I would say, the 3 to 4 common interviews. The first one being the recruiter interview. You guys got to understand, it's funny how many people don't think about this. A common recruiter for an SDR function in particular probably has on the order of 8 to 10 interviews per day, in addition to the communication that they have on top of that. So when you log into your 2 p.m. interview, they have heard just this day alone, let alone what they do on a daily basis for their job. They have probably heard 5 answers already that sound like you. And that's fine. That's fine. My point being is their job is to filter out the total duds, like the people who are just a red flag or really can't convince it. So it sounds more simplistic than it really is when you get into the game time situation, but it truly is. If you can answer these 3 questions very effectively, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to be in tech sales? And why do you want to work at this company specifically? And I would add, what we're seeing works really well, and what the 1% of people are doing, especially in higher levels and beyond, is they are answering, tell me about yourself, and getting ahead of the next potential questions like why tech sales and why do you want to work at this company? We have several videos on that. I've got one on my channel too that talks about how to structure that in 90 seconds, but you're getting out in front of those objections. And what you're subconsciously showing to this recruiter is you are completely on the ball. Within the first 4 minutes of the interview, you've basically answered all of their questions. You may not even have to spend the full 20 minutes on that call, but right away, like I can't tell you how much, again, put yourselves in the shoes of someone who has 8 to 10 interviews a day. If you come in subconsciously, they are literally making a yes/no decision or 80% of their decision within the first 2 minutes of the call. And you may or may not like that, but that's the rules of the game. If you come in, you're on the point, you match their energy. Maybe they do want to shoot the shit and talk about how you both live in Austin or whatever it may be, or maybe they just want to get right into it. Match that energy, and right away you're coming in. And then once you get into that, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. I had a chance to look at your resume, blah, blah, blah. You get in and you crush that question. You've basically gotten 80 to 90% of the way through that interview. We can pause there or keep going to the sales manager, whatever you prefer.
No, I totally agree. If you don't have those 3 answers down yet, don't focus on anything else. That's more of a vetting call. And if you take action and preemptively answer those questions, no matter what it is, tell me about yourself, what led you to the interview, just be ready to deliver those 3. And generally in their head, it's just a sigh of relief. And they're like, great, I can probably get off this call early because this person's qualified. Like, let's get 15 minutes back. So totally agree.
No, and honestly, for this,
I'll say too is that call from a manager's perspective is also really important, only because they generally fill out feedback in some form, like an Excel sheet or something, and they send that to the manager. And so when the manager, that next interview is getting on with you, they're reading that recruiter's context, and they're going to say something like, this person is a killer. Like, they're on the ball. If you just nail those 3 questions, if you don't, they might still move you along, but the feedback and the first impression that manager's coming into the call with, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. So that's another reason why it's a seemingly trivial call at times, that first recruiter call, but it is important. You just got to have those 3 answers down.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I would just add, like, if there's any theme with all of these interviews, the number one differentiator I see, aside from your preparation and actually having good answers in the first place, is actually practicing this out loud. Do not sit there in your head or practicing this out loud with a timer and forcing yourself to answer questions in 60 or 90 seconds is better than doing a mock interview with your mom or whoever, all respect to them, that does not work in tech sales. You need to put yourself in a game time situation with real constraints and practice saying these things out loud until you do it so many times you can't miss. Yep. That being said, looking at the SDR manager interview, I actually want to kick it to you because you were directly in that role for 2 years. I contributed, I've been a part of panel interviews and whatnot for SDRs, but maybe you set the stage with some of the biggest things at that level.
I mean, it's a lot of what we talked about earlier. I trusted that your resume checked out and that you did a good job on the recruiter interview by the time you got to me. I want to feel that energy in terms of, I want to hear those 3 answers again. I expect it to be a little more polished now. I expect you to know a little bit more about the company now. The more interviews you have and the more times you meet, the expectations go up a little bit each time in terms of what you know about the company, the research you've done. So honestly, it wasn't that much different than the recruiter interview. I was making 80% of my decision within the first 3 to 5 minutes. If you had good answers to why do you want to work in tech sales, why do you want to do so at this specific company, and I really felt it. I'm like, man, this person knows why they want to be here and knows what they want to get out of their career. It's an entry-level position. I wasn't expecting you to have hard cold call skills or email prospecting skills yet. Great if you had it, that's an added bonus. But I was more looking for character traits, and you needed to up-level what you did on that recruiter interview and convince me. Again, I want to see how you handle some situational questions and think on your feet. Even things like a cold call role play, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm more judging, did this person prepare for this interview? Do they care? Again, it's like, do you want to be here? Did you come in with a plan? Here's how I prepared for this cold call. Here's the questions I prepared. Here's some of the research I did on the company and the personas you go after and what their pain points are and how, in my case, Oracle aligns to them. Even if your work wasn't great, and I'm like, well, that's not exactly how our persona, like what they care about. At least if you had shown me you had done that upfront effort, I'm like, you're coachable. That's what I was looking for, was someone who is mainly 2 things, a hard worker and coachable. If you were those 2 things and you seemed fired up to be there, it didn't matter to me if you had the perfect answers to any of these questions. I honestly wasn't even listening to how good the answers were a lot of the time. It was more, when I clicked the red button on that Zoom interview at the end, did I feel like fired up, like, yeah, I want that person on my team? That's how you passed an interview with me.
Yeah, no, really well said. I would even add, like I mentioned, I spoke with an SDR manager this morning that's at an AI company, rapidly growing. They just raised 250 million and they're hiring like 15 plus people right now. One of the things I think, to your point, so there's a lot of tactical information we can give on the SDR manager side. I would say the recruiter interview is like 90% tactical. You do all that stuff and you're not a total dud from a personality perspective. You're in for the next round. And then to your point, this is where it gets, call it culture fit, or I don't know. I don't know the exact term, but my broader point being is there's a lot of tactical stuff. I would still say 60 to 70% the way you show up, but there's a little bit more of a subconscious game happening, to your point. And I bring that up to say another SDR manager, the one that I spoke with this morning, was talking about the biggest things when they get a candidate that's actually in their interview that they're kind of vetting for. They don't have an exact science to quantify this per se, but it's internal drive to work hard. Like, can you communicate that with your stories, with the way that you've shown up to this interview, with how you present yourself, that you're going to work hard and I'm not going to have to babysit you, similar to what you said. The second thing is natural curiosity. Hey, I understand you're coming into this and you may not have tech sales experience. In the case of this AI company, you may not know that much about AI besides doing a few ChatGPT prompts. This industry as a whole is like 3 to 5 years old for the majority of people in this industry. So if you're naturally curious, if you want to understand things, if you've done research and you have very pointed questions about the company itself, those are some ways that you can demonstrate that you're not just coming in and kind of looking for people to tell you what to do, but you're actually going to be like trying to figure this out on your own. You have the work ethic, one, to do that, but you also have the curiosity to very quickly make highly effective decisions and iterate rather rapidly, which feeds into his last point on the major trait that he's looking for as well, is adaptability. This can mean many different things. Maybe you don't have a degree and you've worked 10 years in the field and you've tried 2 different careers. This could be you studied a specific degree, but halfway through college, you picked up an interest and added a minor, or were part of a club sport and ended up becoming the club president. Or, I mean, many examples come to mind. There's no one size fits all, but how can you show that you've been in situations where, whether it's a good thing, like, hey, you were in something you thought you wanted and you adapted because you realized there was a better way, or maybe, I mean, within reason, like, don't come in with like a sob story. And obviously I hope, nobody had to deal with some really terrible stuff, but maybe you've gone through some challenges. We've worked with people that moved to the US from a completely different continent when they were in middle school. Like, that's incredibly difficult. You don't even know English. How do you assimilate to a brand new culture, the US culture, first generation college student, like all of these different things? There's many things you can speak to that show your adaptability that they can be kind of personal stories, or they could be like work, school, more tactical stories as well. But again, there's not an exact science here. And those are the types of things that hopefully get you in the right headspace to approach that interview and crush it in the first place. Yeah.
So. And the adaptability question is one I asked all the time. If and this is if you want an answer to the what would make you a good fit or tell me about your strengths, I think if you emphasize hard work, coachability, and adaptability, you're pretty good with those three. Because a lot of times I'd bring up like, hey, this role might not look the same a quarter, 2 quarters from now after you join. You might be in a different industry, selling different products. There's always go-to-market changes. So I wanted to know how they would handle that, because a lot of people, they have a lot of the right traits, but they just can't stand that. They're like, I was doing one thing, selling one product, and now they moved me over to a totally different pillar, totally different group in the company, and they can't handle the change like that. So that is really important. And one last point I'll make too on the curiosity point. I totally agree with that. I almost lump it in with the preparation, because if you're preparing a lot in like researching the company, it's a sign of your curiosity. It's also the questions you ask the interviewer at the end, signaling you've done your research and you're curious. There's no perfect questions, but a lot of times it's asking the manager what they need most on their team or what they're most focused on in the org, and then tying in how you'll bring that to the team. Or it could be just signaling, hey, I was on the website listening to a fireside chat your CEO was given, and he was saying this about the company. Where do you see the company go in the next 2-3 years? Or how do you see the strategy evolving? And just showing genuine curiosity about the company and that you're thinking went a long way too. Because to me, that told me you prepared and you cared and you want to be here. So all good points there. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add on to that. Otherwise,
I'm sure we could be breaking it down, but that's honestly, if you're getting started, that's a great start. Yeah.
And then I guess last point I wanted to cover off, because a lot of people, they do a lot of the right things and they just naturally, they don't get the offers on the first time around. Sometimes for reasons within their control, maybe they just weren't prepared enough, which happens, and they're more prepared the next time they go around. Or it could be something out of their control, like the company was hiring for a role and then they downsized and that role's not available. This can be a process, and part of being successful when it comes to breaking into tech sales is being able to stay consistent and with this process over an extended period of time. So what do you tell people, or how do you prepare them mentally in terms of mindset or habits they should be preparing to build in advance of them deciding, okay, I'm going to do what it takes and I'm committed to breaking into a tech sales role?
Yeah, I think one of the things that immediately jumps to mind, and to go back to an earlier point and why this is so valuable, building a list of 30 to 50 companies, once you understand even just a little bit about the industry, it helps for a couple of reasons. Because to answer your question directly, one of the biggest faults I see of people who are really excited, they want to break in, is they see Salesforce or they see Oracle or they see MongoDB and they get like laser focused. They put out an application and they somehow managed, they got lucky. Their first interview, they got Snowflake. They weren't expecting it at all. And now they put Snowflake on this pedestal, and it's like, it is the end all be all. Their only focus is Snowflake. And actually thinking through it, and again, going back to one exercise of many, actually creating a list of 30 plus companies gets you out of being so laser focused on one company, making this interview life or death, putting this thing on a pedestal. And I think even, you've got to find what that is for you. Maybe you're full-time, like looking for jobs right now, or maybe you're balancing a full-time job and applying on nights and weekends. Set a healthy and realistic and attainable minimum, whether it's 3 jobs a day, 5 jobs a day. That's a great place to start, I think, if you're, working already and trying to break in. If you're full-time, if you're actively looking for a job full-time, maybe take that 5 or so, 7, maybe the first week. And then as you get that workflow down, you'll much more quickly be able to apply to maybe 10 jobs a day at a very high quality level. But just there's that minimum there. Even if it's 1 a day getting started, even if you're kind of so-so on the company, if you have not applied to that many companies or you only have 1 interview right now, there is nothing I've seen more beneficial to people that are actively applying, actively in interview processes, than continually applying to other companies and having multiple interviews at once. There is nothing that will make your interview with Snowflake easier than knowing that you have an interview with Oracle tomorrow. And there's nothing that'll make that Oracle interview easier than having an interview with Salesforce on Thursday. It puts you in a different headspace. It puts you in a place to where you can approach it of, you are searching for the best options. You don't want to overcorrect, be overly egotistical or overconfident. But when you have that safety net, it de-risks the situation, and it allows you still to show up and probably be nervous. That's normal. That's understandable. But less so than like, holy shit, Snowflake is the only interview I have right now. If I mess this up, I'm back to 0. again, I can break that down at a more systematic level, but that's, I think, the number one thing I would say to people really going after it is you have to keep applying. You cannot get laser focused on one opportunity. Get focused on maybe a top 10, a top 15 for sure. But one company is not going to be that insanely better than another company, assuming you're still playing in that tier 1 to maybe mid tier 2 category of companies. So
yes, getting yourself out of a scarcity mindset and not needing to over rely on one opportunity, because there is no perfect company or perfect role. Like the entry level SDR, and I would even say the first 3 years of your career is purely, in my opinion, about getting necessary experience, whether it's at one company versus another. Ideally, what you're looking for is a company that has a track record of promoting internally, but it's about getting that experience you need, learning how to generate pipeline, learning how to manage a territory, learning how to eventually get into running your own sales cycles, negotiate, close deals, getting that base skill set. Because if you do that in the first 1 to 3 years, whether it's at Snowflake or Okta or AWS or a startup, if you have those skills, you're going to be able to make the pivot into the right opportunity if you have landed on that perfect role for yourself after 3 years. But really, it's about not being in a scarcity mindset, not needing to rely on one interview or one job as the end all be all, having options, because it's really about getting the experience you need in those first 1 to 3 years of your career. And then you'll have a better idea of what niche you might want to pivot into or double down on the one you're already in. So well, thanks for coming on, man. We covered a lot. I think if you are breaking in or in the process, this is a really good you don't need perfection. You need to nail the basics that will make you stand out above 90% of candidates. And I think we did a pretty thorough job covering what you need to focus on in this episode here. But Eric, I don't know if there's any final words of advice or last thoughts you have for the audience before we leave off here.
Totally. I mean, I genuinely say this, like, I know it's a lot of the motivation we started making content. Like, if you just watch Connor's and or my YouTube channel, there's a lot of great information to get you started down that path. It's really tempting. And one of the biggest things I see as well is information overload. You watch Connor's video, you watch a video on our channel, you watch a video on 4 other people's channels, you go to TikTok and now you're watching some guy who sells insurance talk about how to, cold call, and you feel like that's progress. But I think, again, you got to find the person that really aligns to your style, that has the track record that aligns to what you want. But if you find Connor's channel is extremely helpful, you are almost in all cases better served staying with his content and or looking for the coaching services that he provides and or in the higher levels community, which he is obviously a major part of as well. Like, if you are trying to break in, I think listening to 1 or 2 key voices. This could also, by the way, forget YouTube, forget higher levels. This could be in your network. If your friend from college or your brother or sister or whoever has been in tech sales for 3 years and they are willing to give you an hour of their time, work with them, right? Like, if they are at a good company, they have a track record, like, that is I think the biggest thing I would leave off with is the quality of information that you get is more important than the quantity. Really easy. Like, maybe, you start and you kind of have to explore. You've got to find the person or persons that you really resonate with. But once you find them, double, triple down on that. And obviously, if you are in a position where you want to expedite it, you want dedicated coaching, you want a streamlined curriculum and live coaching. That is why we built Higher Levels. Even though we make a lot of YouTube content, tons of you were still reaching out to us wanting direct coaching. So that is something we have if that's for you. But if not, like I said, that's my biggest piece of advice. Find those quality signals that align to where you want to go. And really, 80 to 90% of what you consume from an information perspective should be from that source, not just jumping to the next thing, and then trying this thing. And then, some other person on Instagram said this, and so I tried that and I just bombed my interview because it didn't fit into my holistic approach. Like, anyway, maybe I'm saying the same thing 3 times, but I think that's the biggest thing I would leave everyone with. So,
yeah. No, agreed. Find what resonates, whether it's us or, like you said, a family member, different channel. Find what resonates, go deep into that, and just stay focused. So, Eric, appreciate you coming on. I think appreciate the kind words about me, but Eric has helped more than any person I know, helped more people into the thousands break into tech sales. That's why he made Tech Sales Ascension, which is more, you can figure this out on your own, but if you want a repeatable, proven system for doing this, that's what we do in Tech Sales Ascension, and help people accelerate this process and just give them way more confidence every time they go into an interview. So hope to see you all in there. I'll put the links in the pin comment, all that down below. But Eric, thanks again for coming on. I think this is really helpful for the audience here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.